Hello, and welcome to English Podcast Zone USA, the podcast that helps you learn, grow, and connect through English. I'm Marco, your host for this show, and in each episode, we'll explore new topics, share useful tips, and help you take your English to the next level.
Today, we're focusing on early motherhood, which is incredibly special to me because I had a baby about a month ago, my third kiddo. We have a great lineup of callers ready to share their questions today that hopefully apply to you guys as well. Our first caller today is Danet in Vermont. Danet, are you there? Hi, how are you doing? I'm great. How are you doing? I hear you have a question, Dot. I do have a question. All right, fire away. Yeah. So I just gave birth to my first child 3 weeks ago. And I have a very unusual challenge that has to do with my family of origin. So last year, my little brother came out as a woman, and he's 16 years younger than me. So I kind of helped raise him. So I really love him like he's my own. And I'm the only one in the family that doesn't call him by his new name and pronouns. And honestly, I don't really call him anything. I just use workarounds to not offend him or, lie to him as per your advice. So he thinks he's going to be called Annie. And I'm not planning on lying to my daughter about gender. So how do I tell him that he's going to be uncle without blowing up my relationship with him and maybe everybody in my family? And how do I protect my daughter from her ideologically adult relatives? Wow. Yeah. I guess we're going to start out with an easy question, are we? Okay, let me ask you a question. Why have you decided to take the stance that you're taking? Like you said that you love your brother, and I'm not questioning that. And an argument could be made, and people will make this that if you loved him, you would go along with what he is acting out, but you've decided that you're not going to do that. And so why have you done that me intuition? And you honestly, I think have been watching enough of your videos. And in everything that I'm starting to see things clearly, and I don't think it's right. I don't think what he's doing is right. How do you know you're seeing things clearly? What makes you inclined to believe that? I think because it's the only thing that feels right. I think if you took who I was 5 or 10 years ago and pasted it over this situation, I might still have the same reaction, that I might be a little more willing to just kind of go with it. I think I'd be more willing to fall for he's going to hurt himself if I don't refer. Yeah, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. And so let me address this issue now that you've told me that. So what I would say to you is that the truth is a medium to long-term game, right? So it's the best strategy because it falls in accordance with reality, but you can game reality in the short term, which is why people lie and why they go along with false consensus and why they try to gather things for themselves that they don't deserve, but that doesn't work in the medium to long run. It's a very bad strategy. And so I would say that your best bet for maintaining your relationship with your brother over the long run, and that could be decades, and what would also be in his best interest is to stick to the truth. Now, you're going to pay a price for that in the short term, right? You know that. The price is going to be the resistance you're going to get from everybody who's going along with them. They'll be annoyed at you because your stance runs contrary to theirs, and there'll be flack from him as well. But this is where you make a decision of conscience, and you decide whether you're going to stick to what you believe to be right come hell or high water in the hopes that that's the best strategy, all things considered, over the longest period of time. That's what faith in the truth is. So I could define it. Faith in the truth is the belief that whatever happens when you tell the truth is the best thing that could happen regardless of how it looks to you in the moment and maybe to others. Now, the alternative would be faith in falsehood. You could say, well, I'll go along with the illusion. That'll make everyone happy, apparently, and it'll reduce conflict, and that's the best pathway. You don't have any evidence, so to speak, for either of those because you don't know how it's going to play out. And so you have to decide what you're going to stake yourself on, and then you have to pay the price. You're going to pay a price of one form or another. So, yeah, Dan, can I take a stab at this? Please. Yeah. Thank you so much for your call. That's a heavy topic. I think from my perspective, if that was happening to me, especially after having a baby, your baby's so important that you want to get everything right because you're going to get a number of things wrong anyway, right? And I think the political landscape is also changing enough that this might only be a problem for another year or two. That's the hope anyway, because I think people are realizing that that is a lie and that a bunch of people got brainwashed. And so I think maybe hopefully the problems with your family would resolve because of the political changes in the next couple of years anyway. But what should be your number one priority right now is teaching your daughter what's true and what's false. And that is objectively not true. And unfortunately, it's confused a number of people, which is just heartbreaking and terrible. And hopefully it'll resolve. I think it's already resolving, which is the positive thing. But going based on your intuition, especially as a new mom, it's so strong. And so I think what you're doing is definitely the right thing, saying no to that. It's a complicated decision, but I don't think you have an option. It'll just destroy your soul otherwise. A huge part of what's fallen apart in the last year is all the lies that the gender-affirming care advocates have put forward as scientific data. Yeah, thank goodness. The large-scale studies indicate with absolute clarity, as was inevitable, that there's no evidence whatsoever that gender-affirming care produces any improvement in any of the things it was supposed to magically cure, which is only to say that radical and often surgical and hormonal intervention in someone's life when they're depressed and anxious and confused, and a teenager, yeah, right, is somehow not helpful. Or shock, yeah. It's also ridiculous that this has happened with the mental health crisis that's been going on. Like what? 1 in 5 people have a mental illness. How are you supposed to differentiate that from these trans phenomena? Yeah, well, like you said, maybe we've run out the vast, what? I think so. We've run out the foolishness on this, or at least some of it. We'll see, yep. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. Right. Just when you think things can't get any stupider, they're likely to. But yeah. Well, good luck to her. Yeah. And that discussion of the truth was particularly relevant because it is important to understand that faith in the truth is a long-term game. Yeah. And it is soul-crushing if you don't say what's true. Like, she's out of options, really. What is she going to do? Sacrifice her soul. Like, that's what it feels like, I think, when you know you're lying. Or you don't say something. It isn't just your soul either. It would just, you corrupt the soul. Environment by going along with the lies, right? That's why in the story of Abraham, when Abraham is talking to the angels and to God about the potential destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, so the pathological city, God agrees to save the city. If there's 10 people who still walk the righteous path, it starts with 50. That's Abraham's first request, and he bargains God down to 10. There's this very specific meaning to that. And the meaning is that if a society in question that's headed for perdition and destruction at its own hands is still together enough to allow 10 people to say the truth, there's hope, right? And so you're supposed to be one of those 10, right? Well, you're going to pay for that. But you pay for everything. So, like, what's the point? I think I was really fortunate when I was a kid. One of my favorite things that you taught me, probably because I'm disagreeable as well, was don't listen to stupid rules. You taught me that when I think I was in grade 2. And that went haywire for a while as a kid, trying to interpret what on earth does that mean. But don't listen to stupid rules, but be aware that there are going to be consequences for not listening to those stupid rules. Well, that's exactly what we told you. You said, look, you can follow your consequences and oppose the stupid rule, but you have to pay the price for your opposition. And what that was a recognition that a commitment to rebellion, let's say without sacrifice, is a lie. Yeah, it's not going to be easy. No, no. If it's easy, maybe you're not on the rebellious side. Well, it's easy if you get someone else to perform the sacrifice. That's what the activists do all the time. Someone else has to change. No, it's you that has to. You have to pay. Maybe you should, and maybe there'll be a benefit to pay. But you have to pay. You have to be willing to you. Yeah. Well, that also stops you from doing it casually. You know how HIPAA protects your medical information? Doctors can't share anything without your consent, whether it's diabetes, surgery, whatever. That's federal law. But here's the problem. Every time you search online for medical information, data brokers are tracking it and building a profile on you. Then they sell that profile to whoever pays. And just like that, your HIPAA protection is worthless. And insurance companies, they buy these profiles and then use them to raise your premiums. And there's no law stopping this. Until one gets passed, there's really only one way you can protect yourself. Express. Express sends all your online activity through encrypted servers. Nobody can see what you're browsing, not your internet provider, no data brokers, not anyone trying to profit off your medical history. That a lot of people are facing this situation. That's horrible. Yeah, a lot of people. Up next, we've got McKay in Ohio on the line. Hello, McKay. Hi. How are you doing? Well, how are you? Good. Let's hear your question. Yeah, I have 5 kids. I am 26. I have 5 kids. Wow. Good for you. Good for you. 2 of those are foster. Oh, yes. Wow. You're an ambitious creature. Okay. 2 foster kids. 3 of your own kids? Yeah. Okay. And my question is, what are some tangible ways to regulate their temper when dealing with especially young kids, and avoid feeling kind of resentful to them for the demands they make on new time and attention? Yeah, that's a very good question. Okay, are you married? Yes. Okay. Okay, I have a very specific reason for asking that. So look, resentment is an extremely useful emotion. Okay, it's very dangerous. And it's one of the 3 things that really hurt people. Resentment, arrogance, and deceit are like the evil triad. But resentment is extremely useful because it only means one of 2 things if you're experiencing it. One is that you're being taken advantage of and you have something to say and something to sort out. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that you're immature and you're not shouldering your responsibility properly. Well, and it's not. It's not. I'm not accusing you of that at all. I'm just saying that that's what the emotion indicates. Okay, so then the question is, if you notice that you're resentful, which you should notice and which is quite likely, if you're an agreeable and self-sacrificing person, then you have to think, okay, am I being irresponsible and immature, or is too much being asked of me? Okay, now one way of figuring that out is to talk to your partner, your husband, or your wife, and say, look, I notice that under these circumstances, I feel resentful. And I need to figure out if I'm not standing up for myself enough and allowing myself to be taken advantage of, or if I have some residual irresponsibility and immaturity, and I'm just, trying to avoid my duty, and that's a very hard thing to sort out, but really necessary. And having a truthful dialogue with your husband when that happens could be extremely useful. Your goal should be to move forward without resentment, okay? Now, let's put that aside for a moment. Now, the next issue would be, how old are your kids? So, my biological ones are 5, 3, and 1, and then the foster children are 8 and 3. 8 and 3. And 3, okay. Okay, so you have a handful, you have a large number of young children. And so you're going to have a lot of demands on you. Now, it's incumbent on you to organize your environment, the environment of your children, the disciplinary environment, so that you aren't exhausted and harried. And that's going to mean that you have to determine, likely with your husband and with your children, just how much you can be asked to provide and give. Now, if, you might say, well, I should give everything to my children. It's like, hey, fair enough, but you have to give everything in a sustainable manner. You can't give so much that you're exhausted and miserable and things degenerate, right? That's just not helpful. And you're going to have natural limits, and the limits are being indicated by the resentment. Okay, so now what that might mean is that you're inadvertently doing too much. For your kids, right, you're not requiring them to pick up some of the load themselves. The situation isn't sorted out optimally with your husband in terms of division of childcare. You don't have enough help. You're not doing enough for yourself. Any of those are possibilities, and all of them should be investigated. A good rule of thumb with regard to children and caretaking in general is do not do anything for your children that they could do themselves, right? And there's a reason for that. It's not cruel. The reason for that is it's going to be better for everyone, including your children, and certainly you, if they become competent as rapidly as possible. And the way that that happens is by handing them responsibility, even at 18-month-old can help set the table, right? Everyone's got to pitch in, especially with that many young kids and the complexity of that situation. So let me just summarize that. Pay attention to your resentment. Make a goal of getting rid of it. Determine whether that's you or the situation. Now, I would assume that it's the situation first and you second, right? So don't be down on yourself. Talk to your husband when you get resentful and sort out the issue. Hand more responsibility to your kids and work to attain a state where you're not giving more than you can. You see, if you're resentful, it could easily be that you're doing too much for your kids and that emotion is a marker of that. Well, I think also just a step in there. You have 0.5 kids at those ages, especially with the 1 and the 3-year-olds, that is a lot. It is. It is a lot. No sane person can handle that if they're doing 90% of the child care. So if that's what's going on for you, that's not a problem with you. Yeah. Now, the resentment part, I had some issues with resentment when I had my first baby, and I only had one baby, but I was at home all the time. I didn't have any time for myself, that I was very sleep deprived, and after a number of months, I wasn't resentful at the baby, but I was definitely resentful. And I thought I wasn't trying hard enough. That's kind of how it played out in my mind. And that's not what was going on. And that was with one kid, albeit the first kid is it's a lot for people. But I would say that situation, I think primarily you probably need more help. Yeah, that's likely the case. Talk to your husband and figure out how to get somebody there for a couple of hours a day to give you a breather. Otherwise, I don't know how you're going to do it. This isn't some way you can bring up, especially if you're sleep deprived and with 5 kids. Like you need a family member to come in, or you need to figure out how to get like 2 hours a day to be by yourself or do something for yourself. Even that would be helpful. So I don't think it's a you think, but you definitely need some communication with your husband. Like, freak out a little bit. Be like, this is a huge problem that I don't want to be resentful. I'm really tired. Like, I'm not enjoying myself. I'm not the mom I could be if I had a couple of hours to myself. And that's not fair to your kids either. Yeah. So, the key wisdom in Michaela's comment is that because because there are a lot of demands on you and the demands are real, that the first analysis of your situation should be situational, right? Not enough sleep, not enough time for yourself, not enough help, just too much. Now, and so that's not a psychological problem. That's a practical problem. And so you should approach this, and you and your husband should approach this as if it's a practical problem first, with the resentment as a marker for whether or not the problem has been solved properly. And you want to work to not be guilty about trying to rearrange things so you're not resentful. That will be very good for you. It'll be very good for your kids. It'll be very good for your husband. There's nothing in that isn't positive. And so you're wise to address it. And I'll just reiterate one more time. Resentment is unbelievably useful if you use it properly because it's a marker for when things are out of harmony. So don't be guilty at all for fixing that. You'll do everyone a great favor. Good luck, McKay. Thanks a lot for the question. Yeah, thank you. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention too, and I'm a huge proponent of this, obviously, but not feeding your kids sugar and eating whole foods turns them from little psychos that are probably driving you crazy into much calmer children. So I don't know how anybody would deal with 5 kids. Kids who eat sugar all the time and not be crazy themselves. So that's the other thing I would probably mention is like change around their diet so they're not eating processed foods. It makes so much difference. It's crazy. Yeah, you're going to flatten out the insulin drops and spikes by doing that. And the tantrum, the random screaming fits. Like Scarlett had 0 of those. George is this little, I can't even imagine giving him sugar because I think he'd be a complete monster because he already does what he wants yet and doesn't really listen yet. And if you take one of those kids that's already pretty strong-willed and then feed them a high-processed food, high-sugar diet, you can't even discipline that out of them very well. You're magnifying the effect of their emotions by putting them in a state where they're having low blood sugar from insulin overproduction. Yeah. So that's definitely not good. Yeah. No, not doing it at all. High carbohydrate, high sugar diet's a very bad idea. Yeah. And that would help a lot with just calmness overall in the household. Yeah. But also getting some help. I think there's this kind of traditional pushback, which is totally reasonable against the hyper boss babe, that what's the career focus? The career focus women. So there's a pushback to traditional wives, but it's the traditional wife from the 50s, which was a decade period that after a war that I don't really know if that's particularly replicable across time. And so I think there are people, especially Gen Z people, in the situation where they are at home with a whole bunch of kids and are like, this is not doable. And then this is what I've seen anyway. And then the men are like, well, that's the woman's job because there's this tradition pushback. Look, but it's not sustainable with no help. There's a reason that human beings have the lifespan they have, right? The reason we have the lifespan we have is because mothers need grandmothers, or mothers and fathers need grandparents. Yeah. So our species is set up so that raising children is actually a 2-generation job. not a one-generation job, right? And so the idea that it can just, I'm an advocate of a nuclear family, the tradition nuclear family, but only as the minimal sustainable unit. That doesn't mean it's optimal. And when you have little kids, having someone else around to help is very useful and necessary. And you shouldn't be guilty about it. And it's fine for the kids, especially if the additional people are, well, family members help if they're not completely out of their mind, but also stable. So, but the resentment discussion already has been very enlightening and practical because it's the right marker. How much help do you need? Depends on how much work you have and how complicated the situation is. What's the marker? Well, if you're miserable, frustrated, and resentful, well, then maybe that's too much, right? Maybe you're immature as well, and you want to sort that out, right? Because you can nurse your resentment. That's what Cain does in the biblical story. You can nurse your resentment, and you can fall in love with it, and you can let it dominate your life. And that's a super bad idea. But by the same token, especially if you're agreeable, and so that's more of an issue with women, especially child-oriented women. It's very easy for them to self-sacrifice themselves into a state of resentment, and that's toxic, terrible. Yeah. So situational analysis before personality analysis, always, right? One of the fundamental mistakes that people make when they're trying to assess each other's behavior is to attribute to personality what's actually a consequence of situation. There's something to know. Well, that puts all the blame on them. There's something wrong with you, obviously. Well, it's also very simple, right? The problem with the situational analysis is it's complex and it's a lot easier to collapse it to a single variable. You see this in couple disputes often. It's like if there's tension in the household, it's easy for the husband or the wife to assume that it's the personality fault of their partner. It's like the probability that there are faults is quite high on both sides, and maybe you should look to your own damn faults first. But one of the practical ways out of this is to learn before we go at each other. Let's look at what might be contributing to this situationally, right? And that's kind of like the presumption of innocence. Yeah, it's really useful. You have to learn that because it's a very strong human proclivity to go to attribute to personality. So you don't have to say, this is what's wrong with you, and you were born with it. You can say this is what you're doing that's wrong. Well, that's helpful too to say what? That was a joke. I don't know if that would smooth out an argument at all, but it smooths it out somewhat because it makes it more situational than temperamental. But I wouldn't even say this is what you're doing. I would say this is how we are reacting to the situation at hand that you've caused. Okay, next question. Okay, next question. Shopify powers millions of businesses worldwide, supporting everyone from established brands to entrepreneurs just starting their journey. You can create your professional storefront effortlessly with Shopify's extensive library of customizable templates designed to reflect your brand's unique identity. Boost your productivity with Shopify's AI power tools to craft compelling products, descriptions, engaging headlines, and even enhance your products' photography, all with just a few clicks. Plus, you can market your business like a pro without hiring a team. Easily develop and launch targeting email campaigns and social media content that reaches customers wherever they spend their time online or offline. If that's not enough, Shopify offers expert guidance on every aspect of commerce from inventory management to international shipping logistics to seamless return processing. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period and start selling today at Shepherd. Shopify.com/job. Go to Shopify.com/job. Again, that's Shopify.com/JBP. Getting the most out of life means being prepared for whatever comes your way, but many of us don't realize that a simple will doesn't actually cover all aspects of estate planning. There are crucial elements that need separate attention. That's where trust and will steps in to help ensure your loved ones are fully protected in every situation. Right now, you can visit trustandwill.com/Peterson to get 20% off their simple, secure, and expert-backed estate planning services that cover all your essential bases. The process is straightforward and free of complicated legal jargon, so you can complete your estate planning from the comfort of your own home. Knowing your assets and final wishes are properly documented and legally protected can give you peace of mind so that you can focus on living your life fully, knowing your loved ones will be taken care of and according to your exact wishes. Plus, their website is incredibly user-friendly and simple to navigate, making the whole process super straightforward. What's particularly reassuring is that your personal information and documents are protected with bank-level encryption for maximum security. Each will or trust they create is tailored specifically to your state's laws and your individual needs, covering everything from care wishes and guardian nominations to final arrangements and power of attorney documents. It's no wonder they have an overall rating of excellent and thousands of 5-star reviews on Trustpilot. We can't control everything, well, probably in hypothetically and in reality, right? You go to church, find some young families, and get the ball rolling. If you have a problem as a mother of kids of a certain age, you can be certain that 80% of the mothers have the same problem. Yeah. So there's absolutely no reason to assume you made this comment with the trad wife movement. It's like, well, lone woman on the prairie taking care of 6 kids. Well, no, right? Community. Yeah, right. And with that, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be back with more episodes. That was fun. That was way more intense than I was expecting. I was like, I can interject some things, but that was intense. Yeah, well, the questions were very high quality and very thoughtful and very deep and difficult. And so, yeah, that was good. So, thanks very much to the people who participated. They put a lot of thought into that. And thank you to the people who did the screening for the questions as well. The crew here, because that worked very well. Well, we will be back with many other shows like this to answer all sorts of questions. That's the plan, right? We're going to do this on a regular basis, and we'll do a bunch of it if it works. Sounds like a plan. Yeah, good. Thank you to everyone watching and listening. Do you have a question you'd like us to explore? Share it with us at the link in the video's description. And let's face life's challenges together.